You don't have to create an antagonistic relationship with what's invaded your body, right? It's invaded your body, and dealing with these things on an anthropomorphic level as if it's some enemy, that just makes absolutely no sense to me.
Hello and welcome, fellow human. My name is Zachary Stockill, and you are listening to Humans in Love, a podcast that looks at culture, relationships, and personal development from unconventional perspectives. Join me as I dig into the question of how people like you and I might get more out of life and love. Thanks for being here. Hello, friends. Zachary Stockill here, and I'd like to thank you for joining me on another special August edition of Humans in Love. Thank you for all of the kind words that people have been sending me, and I realize that some of you missed the podcast and wish it was coming out more regularly. I'm going to work on that going into the fall, but above all, my focus is always going to be on quality over quantity. So the episodes might premiere a bit erratically, but I hope that's in service of the greater good of just putting out really good content for you guys. As you know, if you've listened to this podcast before, I don't do ads on this podcast. However, I will take 20 seconds, maybe less, maybe more, just to talk to you a little bit about my new book. I just want to say thank you mostly to everyone who has been leaving reviews on Amazon and reaching out to me or sending me emails with regard to my new book. It's called the Overcoming Jealousy Workbook. And I imagine many, if not all, or I shouldn't say all, most of you listening to this probably heard of me or first heard my name in relation to my work on jealousy. And all these years later, it remains a subject that I'm just absolutely fascinated by. It just seems endlessly interesting to me. And I'm always doing my best to put out resources that will be helpful to people struggling with jealousy in their relationships. And on that note, I really think, at the risk of sounding immodest, I really think that I've accomplished that with my newest book. So if you're struggling with any kind of jealousy, or you just want an interesting workbook to kind of get you thinking a little bit more clearly about your relationship and ways to move forward in your life, I think you'll really benefit from my new book. It's called the Overcoming Jealousy Workbook. It's available in paperback. It's available for Kindle. It's available, I think, most online booksellers at this point. Without any further ado, I have a pretty interesting, pretty deep conversation for you guys today. My guest is a returning guest of the show. His name is James Batcho. James is a friend of mine. He's also an author and a philosopher. And you might remember him from I believe it's episode 4 of the podcast before. James and I are both pretty big film geeks, and we talk about culture a lot in that episode. But today the focus is pretty much exclusively personal. James went through a pretty serious health crisis last year, and you know it's a tough thing to talk about. You know, like coming close to getting better in touch with our mortality, and what is it like to suffer a really serious health crisis? How does that change your perspective on the time you have left, et cetera, et cetera? So this is kind of a heavy one today, but I really think it's probably one of my favorite conversations that I've had for this podcast. Actually, I got a lot out of it, and just today, listening to it again as I was editing it, I'm reminded of how impactful it was and how insightful a lot of what James says is. So I hope you'll enjoy this conversation. I hope you benefit from it in some way. I hope it touches you in some way. And don't be afraid, as always, to let me know what you think. You can always reach me by email at zachary@zfstockill.com. You can always go to humansinlove.com to find show notes and a whole lot more. So without any further ado, here's another kitchen table conversation with my good friend, James Batcho. Jim.
Yes.
Welcome back to my kitchen.
Thank you. It's nice to be here again.
Yeah, it's a real pleasure to have you here. What the hell happened to you last year? Why don't we just start there?
Well, everything's going fine and rosy, and feeling a little stressed and overworked in my job. because it was a high-stress teaching situation at a university. I really enjoyed it there. I loved my colleagues and the job and the teaching. But it was a lot, and I was overwhelmed. And one day, I started feeling a pain in my belly, just on my left side, just below my rib cage, and it just increased as the afternoon wore on. By the time I got home, it was really bad, and I thought it was some kind of food poisoning or some kind of, I don't know, something that was going to pass.
Like a dull pain or like a really sharp pain? Or?
Well, that's the thing. It was just, it was an enormous pain. It wasn't like I don't know how to describe it. It was just enormous. And it turned out I was having an attack on my pancreas. I was kind of delirious. I messaged some friends. I was living in China, and what the hell do you do when situations like this happen? I didn't even know where the nearest hospital was. Tip for you folks out there, know where the hospital is.
No matter where you are.
No matter where you are.
That's good advice.
Yeah, so I messaged some friends, and I was like, do you have any, I wanted some antacid or something, And my friend Mike, he played me my message back later, and I was out of breath. I couldn't, it was really kind of scary. And he said, I'm calling you a car. So he got me a car, and I went to the hospital. On the drive over from my house to the hospital, we got stuck in traffic, and I was in the worst pain I've ever experienced in my life. And the thing that I recall later is, it was like the scene in the movie Reservoir Dogs. You remember Reservoir Dogs? Right after the opening scene in the restaurant, there's this sound of pain that kind of brings in the next scene. That's the way I remember it anyway. And then it cuts to, Tim Roth in the backseat of the car after he's been shot, right?
Right.
Harvey Keitel's trying to take him to the safe place. And Tim Roth is just screaming in pain. That's exactly what I was doing. And I was in the backseat, and I was kind of lying there, and just, I couldn't take it anymore. I felt like I was dying. And we got stuck in traffic, and I was going to jump out of the car and just, I don't know what, just get out of that situation. By the time I got to the hospital, I was just delirious with pain, screaming.
Like all over your body? Or?
No, in that spot in my ribs and in my back. And just screaming in pain while they're filling out the paperwork. And I kept thinking, just, why am I conscious? Why am I not passing out? It was that bad. And, I learned later that basically my pancreas was eating itself. And so that was the pain that I was going through. Is my organ was dissolving. And they said if I had gotten there 30 minutes later, I would have died. So thanks to my friend Mike Hughes for rescuing me.
Shout out to Mike.
Well, yeah, exactly. Thanks, buddy. So yeah, that was good. And then they gave me morphine and all of that, and and I was in this hospital in Zhuhai. Let's not name the hospital. That's maybe. But they didn't know what to do with me, and there was a language problem in terms of me not understanding Chinese, and there wasn't very much English being spoken. So I was kind of stuck in this situation. They gave me a diagnosis. They would do these tests, all that sort of thing. Getting a lot of painkillers, being, completely out of it. Friends and colleagues visiting me and checking up on me. But I was a mess. And I was in that state they kept me there for about 3 weeks. Eventually they said, okay, we're going to try to put you on some food. And so I started eating food, and then I felt okay. And they said, okay, you can go home. they said, be very careful with your diet. And even my colleagues were saying, just eat congee, water, rice. That's it. And I was arrogant, and I ate things that I thought were healthy. And I had a relapse 3 days later. And again, I was in enormous pain, not as much pain, but I couldn't take it. And I had a colleague that time drive me to the hospital. Stayed again for a while. And then eventually the doctors came around and they said, honestly, we don't know why you're not dead. And we don't know what else to do with you. You need to go. They said, go to the States, whatever. I had no health insurance in the States. This is the problem of the U.S. health system, is that I did not have coverage there. Coverage in the States is usually done through employment. And I was not employed in the States. And so I couldn't go home. But the hospital kicked me out, even though I wasn't healthy. So some friends at my university came through. A friend of mine named Iceman secured me this situation where I would be transported by a private company over to Hong Kong and get treatment there. So that's what I did. I stayed in Hong Kong. I got this doctor who was very animated. He's like, you almost died, but you have a chance for a second life. And he was very, very animated and excited. I stayed there for about a month. And then eventually, I ran into, my health insurance ran out. I was stuck with these bills that were piling up, and I had to get out of there. And my sisters came through. My two elder sisters came through. One of my sisters came to visit me in Hong Kong. She said you could stay with me in the U.S. The other sister set up a GoFundMe, and I was really uncomfortable with that because I didn't want to ask for people to do that. But she insisted, and that ended up, really in a financial sense saving me. And all of these people came through and donated, and I was just stunned at how much money I raised through that. And that's this whole community of friends and that I've really nurtured, and people that I care about, and people that I've known in these different places that I've lived, and who've been in my life. Just $100 here, $200 there, $25 there. In some cases, $1,000 here and there, just coming through and saving me. And it was a lot of people. And it's, I didn't want to really take note too strongly of who was donating me, because I didn't want to take note of who didn't. Do you know what I mean? So I was thankful for what everybody did. And I haven't been able to thank people on an individual level, but I hope they know how much I appreciate that, because that was huge. And then my other sister gave me a place to stay in the States, and both of them helped me, work through the problems of health insurance in the States. I was able to get on Medicaid, Obamacare. So thanks, Obamacare. Yeah, thanks, Sincerely. Obama. Sincerely, thank you, Obama. So I went back to the States. I had, 3 different doctors look at me, and my sister Catherine came up with these recipes that I could eat, and I was much more careful with my food this time, and slowly gained some strength back.
Let's back up for a minute, because so we were just talking before we started recording. The last time I saw you was in a hospital room in Hong Kong.
You came to visit me, yes.
Yeah, I did, yeah.
And that was great.
And this was, I think it was it the day before you were due to fly back? I don't know if you remember. I think it was.
Was it the day before?
I think you were flying out literally the next day.
Okay.
If memory serves. Yeah. And you looked terrible.
Thank you.
Yeah, but and that... I was, and that, I guess I'm telling you that now because, seeing you today and seeing you roll up, with good color in your face and, seemingly good energy and, it was very nice to see that because you were in rough shape,
Yeah, it was
obviously.
It was interesting seeing the faces seeing me because I could sense that. It's strange when you're in that situation because you're dealing with it, and yeah, I had kind of a weird reaction to having friends come visit me because I wanted people. I had this idea in my head. I don't want anybody to come visit me because it's, then they're gonna be upset when they see me, and also I'm not gonna. I don't know what to say. I don't know. Maybe it's the appearance that I want to give to friends. I don't know. There's a certain amount of vanity there.
Well, I wonder also, and again, I've never been in your position, but I've been in the position of, well, for example, when my mother died, people they're looking to you to provide something that you don't know how to provide, and it's like, and you really don't know what to say and how to handle that, and people don't know how to act, and so I wonder if it's similar to that in some ways, where people are looking for something from you that maybe you're not in any position to give.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, I think that's part of it. I don't know exactly what it is, but then. Like there's a friend of mine, Gino, who wanted to come from Korea. And this was early in my process, and I was still in a massive amount of pain. And especially during that time, I was like, no, Gino, don't fly over here. Because you're just going to sit here, and I'm going to be lying there in pain. Having said that, once people did come, I was happy they came. But especially early on, like you saw me it's funny that you say that I look terrible. Early on, I remember the faces of people, and I looked awful. And I had colleagues come visit me, and I remember the looks on their faces looking at me, because it's a strange thing to think about how close I was to death a couple of times, and in those early moments I was close. I guess throughout the whole thing, I could have gone at any time, and I just didn't. Which is, I think, why the doctors said that. They said, "We don't know why you're not dead. Please leave."
Well, when I was visiting you in Hong Kong, I don't know how much you remember because you were probably on some serious painkillers.
Well, that's the thing that's the other part of the process is people would come visit, and I was half of myself. And I think I probably told you at some point, like when people would visit, I'd have to actually say I can't talk anymore.
Yeah, and you pretty much, I think, I don't remember how long we were talking, but I remember there came a point when you were pretty wiped out, so I skedaddled. But I mean, when I visited you, I was struck by your self-awareness and even the degree to which it seemed like you were able to be reflective even in the midst of what I can only imagine was an enormously traumatic experience. So I guess I'm just curious, like when you're in that hospital room, when the doctors are telling you these things, and when you're by no means out of the clear, like what's going through your head?
You're just doing it. You just they give you information, you say okay. They say, do this, do that, and you say, okay. There's different types of hospitalization, obviously different conditions. From my situation, my brain, I think the other thing that happens is, I didn't eat for 3 months. So I was on one of these bags, IV bags, that they give you. So I basically fasted for 3 months. I couldn't eat any fat. And later learned that, fat is very necessary for your brain. Like, your brain needs fat in order to process. So I was kind of in a daze the whole time. I don't, that's a period of time where I get snapshots of memories of things, but mostly, and I tried to do some reading. I read a couple of books. I didn't watch much TV. I tried to watch some TV series, but nothing was interesting me. Like I watched the Daredevil TV show and some other TV shows, and it just wasn't, nothing was interesting. And it might have to do with this sort of brain shutdown. I remember spending a lot of time staring at the curtains, you know, in the hospital room, and just really staring at the pattern. That's what I would do. I would really look at that pattern. Yeah. And then in terms of them telling you things like, you know, updates on your health, you just go with it. I think in my experience, you know, you become very practical about what's happening. And I think different people deal with the idea of death in different ways. And I feel like I have a pretty comfortable relationship with my mortality. I don't mind the idea of being taken anytime. Sorry, that's a little dark, but...
No, that's what we're here for, more or less. I mean, I'm curious about that. Yeah, because I remember you mentioned something to that effect when I was seeing you in the hotel room, or in the hospital room, rather. Mm-hmm. And I didn't take it as being dark or morbid. I mean, you know, I've experienced some pretty serious... 3 people, basically the 3 closest women to me have died over the past year and a half. And as one who has been interested in Stoic philosophy for a long time, you know, one of the central tenets of Stoic philosophy is, you know, come to grips with your own mortality, let it inform everything you do, take some time every day to reflect on it. You know, there's a lot of similar ideas in Buddhism. And, you know, I've spent a lot of time in places like Varanasi in India and watching the burning ghats and things like that. This is something that I've always tried to do, but when I actually came really, you know, face to face with death in a lot of ways, I realized that I was talking shit before. I didn't get it at all. Mm-hmm. You know, I really didn't. And so, yeah, I mean, that's part of the reason I wanted to talk to you today, is because I think it's really important to think about and to have these kind of conversations, and to sort of get away from this idea that talking about death is morbid, or, you know, it's like in the West we do such a good job of ignoring this, you know, for our entire lives. Just, you know, when someone dies, we put makeup on them, we put them in their favorite suit, and we pretend that they're, you know, taking a sleep, and we do everything within our power to ignore it. Right. But the thing that I've found in my life, and I don't know if this resonates with you at all, the thing that I've found is the more that I reflect on my own mortality, the more I keep it right up front, the better my life is. You know, the more full my days feel, the more I can let go of just all the petty bullshit that piles up over the day or the weeks or the months. You know, the better my life, the better my quality of life gets, the more that I really try to internalize it. Now, I've been in a motorcycle accident, you know, that was, you know, and it was nowhere near as close to death as your experience. So again, you know, when/if that happens to me, perhaps I'll feel differently. Perhaps I'm not as, I don't know, well adjusted to the idea as I think I am. Probably not. But yeah, I mean, what does that, has it, I mean, it's such a cliche to ask if it's changed you, because obviously it has, but I mean, how has it changed you, and what the hell have the past 6 months been like, you know, just kind of dealing with what you've been through?
Well, there's so much there in what you said. If we go back to the idea of an awareness of death, I think you're right that Buddhism deals with this well. Stoicism deals with this very well. Heidegger deals with this very well. The idea of life as being towards death. You know, once you bring it to you, your own mortality, it's a much healthier way of dealing with things. And I've done a lot of readings of Heidegger and Stoic philosophy, and some in Buddhism. And yeah, it's a very healthy way to approach things. There's a difference between the one who is going through it and the one who loves the one who is going through it.
Of course.
And so your experiences with your loved ones that you mentioned, that's incredibly difficult. And that rocks your world, and that brings into question all of the things that you've experienced, in your case with the women in your life, and how that has come to define you, and what their loss means to you. That's enormously complex. I think one's own death is fairly simple, or the idea of one's own death is fairly simple. The other thing that comes to mind is not sure how to put this, but when you're going through or for me, when I was going through the process I was going through, again, if I don't wake up, or that's fine with me, because to me, that whether I live 80 years or whether I live 20 years or whether I live 50 years, it's all the same, kind of, because a life is just the time you're given, and what's 80 years compared to 50 years? I don't know.
I'd say a lot. I mean, and you're still a relatively young person. You're a little older than me, but not, you're not an elderly person by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, I like being alive.
I do too.
I really enjoy
that's
it.
The thing.
I dig it.
Those
man.
things aren't
and
at odds.
I want to stretch it out for. I don't know. I'm greedy. I want more, and I find it interesting you don't.
Well, no, I do. I want to keep living. I like being alive, but in the sense of not living anymore, what does it matter?
Because you won't know.
Because I won't know. I'm not there.
Sure.
So I don't know. Maybe that's to give me comfort. I'm not sure. But I do think that, I mean, had I not had the experiences that I've had, like had I had different experiences, I might have a different outlook. But I feel like I've lived a very rich life, and I think we talked about this in the previous discussion we had. But I think I'm just sort of trying to point out that distinction. Even though for me it doesn't matter, for people who love you it does matter. I would have a different perspective if I was married and had kids. Right. Which would bring a completely different mindset, I think, to that. So there's that. And then I forgot your question. How have the past 6 months been?
Well, I'll tell you one thing that I was thinking about. And again, this is very, very different. But I had not an unserious motorcycle accident. And for a long, long time after that experience, I would think of it and I would get a kind of chill or a almost like you wake up from a bad dream at night, that jolt of something. And this is not when I was dreaming or asleep. I would think of it now, like in the middle of the day, and I would have that kind of like woof, like, whew, that was close in some ways. And so I guess I'm curious about what the past 6+ months have been like for you, dealing with kind of the aftershock of what you've been through.
Well, the past 6 months have been me being very, very careful. Because, in between my 2 hospitalizations, I fucked up. I ate food that I shouldn't have eaten, and my pancreas responded, and it got worse. So basically I've just been trying to be careful, very careful in what I eat, and very slowly coming around to gaining strength, being patient, resting. I'm a pretty chill dude anyway, I think, and my hobbies are reading and writing and playing music. So I did a lot of reading and writing. During those 6 months, I got very into a routine. I would do Tai Chi in the morning, and because the guy in Hong Kong, one of the nurses in Hong Kong, he recommended Tai Chi for me for recovery. I was offered some physical therapy, but I couldn't afford it. And the nurse started doing some moves in the hospital, and saying that would be a good way to recover. So I started doing that. Slowly started taking walks. But I would have a routine. Yeah, I would do some Tai Chi in the morning. I would make some oatmeal. I had a very specific recipe that I developed. And then, I'm supposed to eat like small things 5 times a day. And my sister was just amazing. She came up with all these fantastic recipes that were delicious. And, the things I can't do alcohol anymore. I couldn't do any fried food, processed food. Nothing high fat, nothing with oil. And when you think about it, no dairy's high fat, no cheese, things like this. And when you think about these things, and then you include things like, eating, like the right kind of carbs, trying to get organic things, when you really think about that stuff, it becomes a way of life. So diet became my routine that I would think about. And then reading and writing every day. I would start every day writing. And so I was working on a couple of academic essays, and then also working on 2 book projects at the same time. And that's carried over to now, and I'm still continuing that and still working. It's going to be another series of writing projects that 5 people will read, but it was part of my
spoken like a true academic.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you? And this is a completely unfair and perhaps dumb question, but I'm going to ask it anyway.
Great.
Do you feel like you've processed what you went through?
Yeah, I feel that's sort of the question you're getting at, and I'm it's an excellent question. And I don't know how to answer it. I think really I've tried to cultivate the idea of living in the moment. So every day was just that day. I don't know to what level I processed the idea that I almost died. I'm kind of embarrassed, and maybe I should feel ashamed of this, but I don't dwell on it very much. I don't. It doesn't have I mean, I know that I went through. I went through that for 5 months and then recovery for 6 months. That I went through that for 3 months and then recovery for what is now 6 months. And that it was difficult, but it's just something that I had to do. And again, the idea of death, it just didn't happen. It could have happened, but it didn't happen. But isn't that being alive? So I don't know if I have anything. I don't know if I have any lessons from that. I mean, the lesson that I can carry with me right now is take good care of yourself. Appreciate your friends. Appreciate the time that you have to have this day. I'm not out there, jumping out of airplanes and, doing extreme sports because, yay, I'm alive. I maybe it's a personality thing, but just every moment happy to be able to spend time with friends, happy, thankful to be able to play drums again. Happy to enjoy good quality food, and I don't know. You hear these stories of you've got and again, my doctor told me this. He said, you've got a new life, live it well. Well, I think I am trying to live it well. But I don't know am I supposed to do something? I don't know. And maybe there's, maybe I should be reflecting more on that stuff. But I don't know. I really don't
And it's still
know how to answer that question.
It's still pretty fresh, really.
Well, yeah, maybe so, and maybe I'm in some sort of denial too.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned you might be embarrassing. I don't like. Why would you feel like it might be embarrassing that you're not?
Because you're supposed to, the narrative, the Hollywood narrative, is you're supposed to now do something profound, and I just don't feel that. The thing that I want to do is, I actually do. I mean, okay, I do want to live a little bit differently in the sense of. I'm taking on more of an interest now in what's happening to the planet, for example. And the idea of I want to try to educate in different ways, maybe outside of academia. The reason why I love being a teacher and why I love teaching students is to inspire them to create narratives and live interesting lives. I always try to encourage my students to live interesting lives, and I'm just sort of continuing that. So it hasn't been kind of the watershed that maybe people might expect, but I think everybody's different. So the embarrassment is that I'm not. I wish I had some kind of maybe Hollywood way of saying it or living, but I just want, I'm grateful for being alive. I went through it, I dealt with it, but it wasn't, I mean, there's a lot and I think people are different. I think I'm weird. I think I'm wired in a weird way because, I've had, like, for example, friends go through cancer treatment, and it's horrific, and there's very much the narrative of I'm going to fight this, I'm going to do it. And for me, fighting was just let's get through this day. I want to be careful here because I think I don't want to diminish the idea of a fight, but I don't think you fight these things. I think you keep living. It's not a fight. Pancreatitis is something that happened to me. Cancer is something that happens to people. You deal with it on an hourly, daily basis. Cancer's going to decide. The illness is going to decide. Just, do what you can to be healthy and be in the right frame of mind. I think being in the right mental frame of mind is very important.
I remember probably my favorite stand-up comedian, Norm Macdonald, had a bit about the whole narrative of, and it was a very profound and very deep bit, even though on the surface it didn't seem like that, where he was talking about his uncle fighting cancer, and the uncle dies. He says, yeah, he lost his battle. He lost his fight. What a loser. Like, the last thing he did was lose. And he's critiquing this whole idea, right? Yeah. Yeah, it's exactly what you're saying. In recent years, I've come to question that way of looking at it as well, and the whole idea that you just have to fight with everything in you rather than, in some ways, perhaps sometimes letting nature take its course, so to speak.
Well, exactly, and that's why I don't like these "fuck cancer" T-shirts and all that kind of stuff. You don't have to create an antagonistic relationship with what's invaded your body, right? It's invaded your body, and dealing with these things on an anthropomorphic level, as if it's some enemy, or something like that, just makes absolutely no sense to me. What you have to do is you have to be focused on getting healthy, and do the fucking best you can. Because I do believe that there's some aspect of intentionality, that there's some, that there is a will aspect to it. But you don't have to create this oppositional, antagonistic situation with it, because, like Norm Macdonald said, chances are you're going to lose. I mean, why why make a battle out of it? Just do what you can every day. Listen to your doctor. Take care of yourself. Appreciate the people around you. Appreciate the life that you have been given, and do your best to eat the right foods and all of that. I mean, there's a lot of people, I think, who have probably fought the cancer battle and then go back to their same lifestyle, and that's not winning.
You mentioned a few times, you said things like, you were eating the wrong foods and now you're eating the right foods or whatever, and you're taking your diet a lot more seriously. Constant source of just puzzlement. Is that a word, puzzlement? I think it is.
I think so.
Let's go with that. For me is, in 2019, why the hell isn't there some sort of consensus on what constitutes a healthy diet? I realize that there's a very long and convoluted answer to that question that involves, various lobbies and special interest groups promoting certain ideas and all the rest.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
And I also wonder, though, the extent to which our bodies are very different. You know what I mean? Like, if I ate the same diet as anyone out walking in the streets of Thailand, any Thai people, I would probably be a lot heavier than I am right now, because my body, I've tried these diets. They just, I process things differently, I think, but it's so bizarre to me. Like, why, science has come so far. We've landed a man on the moon. We've done all these things. We have the internet, but there's very little consensus. It seems to me, maybe I'm wrong, but as one who's perhaps not investigated this as much as I should, it seems to me there isn't as much consensus as I feel like there should be around what the hell we should eat.
I think a lot of it's political. I think you can't separate science from ideology.
Sure.
Those two always, there's always something at work there. Science is not an objective process. I don't know. I think I think there's different situations depending on what ails you, first of all.
Sure.
And I can speak from my own situation that I think eating a ton of meat is probably a bad idea. These paleo diets or whatever, I haven't really looked into.
The new fad is carnivore diets, where it's straight meat all the time.
Yeah, that's a bad idea. That's just absolutely ridiculous. Good luck. I mean, I think with those diets, they tend to not eat carbs, right? Is that part
it's
of
very, very low carb, but the new fad is people eating literally, like there's some people eating just nothing but beef. That's it.
Wow.
Like nothing but, animal protein coming from a cow. Like that's it.
Yeah. Good luck with your call.
Yeah, that seems, and I'm a meat eater. I like meat, but that seems a bit a bit much. For
me, that's why I don't understand these fads. I don't have a particular diet. I have my own particular diet.
I was going to ask you, what are you eating these days?
So, for me, it's no processed foods, no fried foods, no alcohol, which is a drag because I like alcohol. No... Have I already mentioned all this stuff?
No.
Okay. No processed food, no fried foods, low fat, low to no oil. No dairy, no cheese.
Oh, you did mention some of this.
Were we talking
a little bit? Yeah,
just personally.
But is this particularly related to your
my situation?
Right? Because your pancreas. I don't even know what the pancreas does. To be honest,
it processes foods,
right?
And it doesn't like certain things like alcohol and high fat.
Right.
So my nickname for my pancreas, and this is something I came up with in the hospital, is Sam Rockwell.
I like Sam Rockwell. I think he's a very underappreciated actor.
He's beginning to get appreciated. He's an excellent actor. But, at least in the past, he's always playing these characters who have something off about, these characters that have something off about them. They really want to kind of get along. But that at some point in the movie, something's going to snap and Sam Rockwell is just going to explode and burn everything to the ground. That's how I have to treat my pancreas right now. is I just don't want to set off Sam Rockwell. So because I still feel it. Like when I eat certain foods, it's usually the first meal of the day. I feel the pressure, and there's always this tiny bit of oh no. So still, or if I eat something like I had some Isan food. Is that how you say Isan food?
Isan.
Yeah.
East Thailand.
Yeah. And that gave me some pressure, and I'm like, oh no. I just don't want to set him off. So my diet is, and you can replace certain things. Instead of things like creams and butters, I do non-fat yogurt. I do a lot of non-fat yogurt. I cook a lot of food, and I cook a lot of curries and things like that, but with no coconut milk, because coconut milk is high in fat. Instead of oils, I use broth.
So in essence, I mean,
things like this.
Your relationship with your body is very different now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, like if people want to lose weight, like I feel fantastic right now.
You're much, much, much thinner than
I'm about
I've ever known you. Yeah.
What, 60 kilos, 135 pounds?
And you feel better in your body.
Oh yeah, I feel fantastic.
How's your energy level?
Energy's off the charts.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
And it's from being very careful with my diet.
And again, just to emphasize, 6 months ago you looked like you were knocking on heaven's door.
Yeah.
No offense.
No,
but
absolutely.
The transformation is remarkable, really.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I was like when I got to Virginia, I was very pale. When when I first arrived in the States, my sister picked me up, and it was right around Christmas time, and I remember Christmas and her family, and I felt like I remember my grandmother when she was near death, and all the family came to visit her, and we were all excited, and I remember thinking to her, she must be on a completely different time scale, like that everything's moving in fast motion. That's what it felt like when I first got to my sister's. Everything was moving. Everything seemed so hyperkinetic, because I was not. Right. Everything was moving too fast for me. I don't know why I mentioned that. I forgot what you said.
I was just really commenting on the transformation.
Yeah. So it went from that to really developing this diet. I mean, for me, it's just a matter of moderation. I still eat meat, but I find that I only need meat about once every 3 to 4 days. Most of my protein comes from other sources, and moderation with things. Trying to eat a lot of plants. Eating carbs. I have to eat carbs. I mean, there's not a lot I can eat, so I got to eat something. Sure. So I eat carbs, I eat pastas, I eat rice, I eat brown rice.
You must be thinking clearly with, no booze, no.
Well, that's the other thing is no booze. My alertness and my ability to focus on my writing has been fantastic. An interesting thing that's happened though is I'm not sure if this is actually true or if I'm just in a certain mood right now, but playing music hasn't been quite as fun. And I think that music and alcohol for me go together. Being away from alcohol does great things for your body, and it does strange things in other areas, because I like to drink. I don't think I was a lush. I had my moments. I had my periods of time in life. But I think I was fairly moderate. But I like having 3 drinks with friends and hanging out and having conversations that way. And I like going on stage and playing music after having a couple of drinks. And I'm wondering if, some of those aspects are going to be lost. 5%. I still like going to the bar and hanging out with my friends. And I like the fact that, at least in my experience so far, they haven't felt like they've had to not drink. Do you know what I mean? Because I don't want that. Sure. Please continue to enjoy your enjoyment. So that's been okay. I can hang out with friends, but, I like to drink. I like the social aspect of it.
It's funny you mentioned the music thing too, because last year I did Sober October. So I was stone cold sober for
Andy
the month
did that
of
too, right?
Yeah,
Andy did that.
There's a few of us. So just, and I'm by no means like a super heavy drinker, but
Right.
I just
You're
decided,
kinda like me.
yeah, exactly. I would enjoy it socially and whatever. But I would still go out during the month of October and stuff. And I would still DJ, just play like little bars and stuff. And I found DJing was a lot less fun when I didn't have a couple pints or something. So,
well, yeah. And I remember there's been times when you see a different world when you're sober than when you're drunk. I mean, the drunk world is a very creepy place when you're sober.
It really is. Yeah, you see some horrible scenes and just pickups gone awry.
It's almost like it's almost like a kind of psychedelic experience because people's faces start melting.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. You should see when you're DJing and you're elevated and you can see the whole crowd in front of you.
Yeah,
that's a psychedelic experience, man. When you see all of this. Just
it's like you see the truth,
stories.
The truth unfold. Yeah,
and then of course the inevitable thought: God, do I really look like that when I'm half in the bag?
Right.
Are you thinking? How are you thinking about the future these days? Have you started thinking in smaller chunks, perhaps, or doing less or more planning, or has your relationship with thinking about the future changed at all? Do you think
it's mostly in not wanting to put myself in a position to get sick again? That's my main focus. And that goes for career and work. I don't want to... academia is really stressful these days. Universities are really overworking their professors. And I'm the kind of professor who wants to do research, do writing and things like that. You're supposed to do that. But there's been less and less time in my experience in the jobs that I've had. So in terms of continuing my career in academia, I want to be in a situation where I'm not stressing myself out because I do care. I mean, I care about teaching the students. I care about my grading. And that always comes first. And then I have to keep doing research. And then, you've got the committee shit that you've got to do. And it, in the sense of something's got to go, it builds up stress. And I think that buildup of stress has led me to get sick. So I'm looking at possibly alternate ways, or at least if I can't find an alternate way, then at least get into a university where I'm not so stressed out. And I deal with stress in weird ways, I think. I'm one of those kind of people who feels like everything's fine without knowing that I'm in a stressful situation. So I don't always recognize it.
You mentioned you've been writing. What are you writing? What are you working on?
It's a continuation of the work I've been doing. I'm trying to do a philosophy of audibility. I probably talked about this before with you.
A little bit, but I think it's worth unpacking.
Sure. If the classic Greek concept of epistemology and knowledge is through vision and through rhetoric, is basically Plato and Aristotle's main ways of knowledge, and for Aristotle, and I think Plato as well, is that the rhetoric is what separates the cultured from the uncultured. So rhetoric is a big part of it. I'm wondering about this other aspect, and that is sort of our experiences of hearing and listening that have no system of understanding, so no language, and that is not visual. So we're constantly in this sensory experience, and what are we making of that? That's been the work that I'm trying to do. And so that leads to a lot of pre-Socratic philosophy, like before Aristotle categorized everything. I'm going to start dipping more into Buddhist and Hindu philosophy and maybe some Sufi mysticism and things like this. It's not about music. It's about the everyday experience of being audible and what we make of that. So that's what I'm working on, and it's going into 2 books. And the first, I already finished a book on. I did this through cinema with Terrence Malick. So I did a book on Terrence Malick about an unseeing cinema or an audible cinema. And now I'm the next project, which is almost done now because I did so much work while I was recovering. I think it's going to be called Essays in Audibility. So it's going to be a series of 12 to 15 essays on different topics of audibility, like understanding, belief, memory, a concept of law, a concept of signs, interpretation. So these are all the kind of different essays. And they're meant to work together but also be standalone. And then at the same time, I've got this other book on pre-Socratic concepts of hearing and listening. And that's going to join with some ancient Asian philosophies.
Sounds like some nice light reading.
Oh, God. The list is just incredible. The list is endless. And the amount of effort that I put into reading is enormous. And I still don't know what I'm doing. So, yeah.
Any parting words before we go get lunch?
There's some things I wanted to say and they're not coming to mind. Can I just say thanks to everybody who contacted me and donated money and came and visited me. Even though I was resistant to people coming to visit me, those visits meant a lot. Obviously, the donations really saved me. I would be destitute, quite literally, right now if people hadn't done that. And I'm so appreciative of the friends that I have and the family that I have. My family really came together and helped me. And it sometimes moves me in a way that that overwhelms me. The generosity of people really affects me and it means a lot to me. And I don't know, I'm very happy to be alive. Death could take me any minute and that's fine. I'm very happy to be alive. I don't want to go through another experience like that ever again. So I'm going to take care of myself. I don't really have any wisdom to share with people other than enjoy your life and enjoy the time you have with others. It's all very cliche stuff, but take care of your body because, your body is taking care of you. That sounds cheesy as fuck.
No, but, and the main thrust of what you've been saying, I think, for a lot of this conversation, be present, man. Enjoy that cup of coffee, enjoy this cup of tea.
Right, and
really, I can't imagine anything more profound than that. Really.
Get away from your phone and, read some Stoic philosophy,
Read Meditations.
Read Meditations, yeah, or some Epictetus, or, read some books.
Read some books.
Yes, I highly recommend it.
Well, Jim, it's really, really good to see you.
Always
to
a
say,
pleasure.
I'm really glad you're doing so much better, and
Thanks.
And thanks a lot for this.
Thanks very much.
There you have it, my friends. I hope you enjoyed the conversation with James. Enjoyed is maybe the wrong word. I hope you got something out of that conversation. I certainly did, and James is always a really good sport to make time for me to come on the podcast, and I'm pretty confident that he'll be back on at some point soon. So I'll use this opportunity to remind you that, if you haven't subscribed to Humans in Love, please do so. You can do so on Apple Podcasts or your podcast app of choice. While you're at it, ratings and reviews are really, really helpful for any podcast success. So if you dig the show, please let others know and go to iTunes, go to Apple Podcasts, go to your podcast app of choice, and please leave a rating and a review. I will end the show today, as I always do, by reminding you that life is short, and I think this is a particularly appropriate episode to end on that note. And I really hope you enjoy the rest of your summer. If you're in the non-Australia, New Zealand part of the world, hope you really enjoy the rest of your summer. And I'll be coming to you again with more episodes very, very soon.